outcomes. And that's what is guided by the ESOS framework that we comply with as, CRICOS providers, and of course the new standards, 2025 RTO standards. So if you look at it closely, we'll we will basically look at the commission restrictions, the better transparency obligations now that the RTOs will have to comply with, PRISM visibility, which in fact is critical to analytics moving forward, and of course, governance scrutiny, which basically around the ownership, the fit and proper person declarations, around who you work with, and what their stakes are. So it's very important to closely take a look at that. Now, the objectives primarily are understanding the structural impacts, identifying the revenue exposure, assessing agent performance, which we are, with the CRICOS providers are required to do as per Standard 4. You got to monitor your agents, and not just monitor, you got to make sure that you comply with the requirements at all times with respect to agent management, reviewing their contracts and commissions, mapping your governance and ownership risks, both at systemic and at operational levels, and of course, build a roadmap moving forward so that not just the management team, but also the individuals who are dealing with the agents within your organization, they're also well versed with what's coming, what they need to do. So it's important to develop practical time-bound steps, basically to ensure that you're completely ready to take on the new changes that are coming in. Now, we are entering into a complete new regulatory environment. Now, as I said, this is not an isolated reform. It's a package of interconnected changes across, not just the ESOS Act, the National Code, but also across the standards for RTOs 2025. So it's designed primarily to improve accountability across the sector.
Sam, before we actually jump into the regulatory reset, can we take a step back and decode the commission restrictions? Because I think that has been the talk of the industry, and it's a very crucial topic that we need to dissect. So when it comes to commission restrictions, can we elaborate on what is it that is allowed, what is it that is okay for the onshore commission payments, and where exactly are the restrictions coming into place? Because I think that is the clarity that each and everyone in the sector is very keen to hear at this stage. So it'll be good to sort of throw some light on the topic before we actually step into the regulatory reset. Sorry to abruptly stepping into that, but I just thought.
Absolutely perfect. Now, that's what we'll be talking about in the coming slides. But just to give you a quick, catch up on what's coming. Now, see, in terms of the commissions, the providers will only be allowed to give commissions to the agents for students who have, like for the offshore students, the students who move onshore from one provider to the other, there won't be any commissions for that. That's pretty clear, as we'll see in the upcoming slides. So it is important because, at the end of the day, we're talking about the quality outcomes. And that will happen only when the students complete their qualifications, not just, keep moving from one provider to the other. And that needs to, and for that to happen, in fact, there are changes at different levels that has to take place. Not just at the the relationship that the provider has with the agent, but also at both the systemic and the operational levels within the RTOs.
That's correct.
So so we'll look at all of that in the coming slides, and
Thank you so much, Sam.
Pleasure, not a problem. So I mean, as you can see, there are 6 core areas which will be the focus: commission restrictions, standard 4 requirements, reporting, prisms, and of course, owner notification, fit and proper person testing. Now, commission restrictions, as I said, no commission for onshore transfer students, limited transitional exemptions only, applies, post commencement of the principal course only. So the student, if they're studying at a particular provider, they cannot move, they cannot transfer to a different provider in the first 6 months. So it's important that they stay there for 6 months before moving to another provider. And of course, there are no commissions for the agents in case they are moving onshore students to different providers. Now, basically, it's targeting you know uh, the the revenue base that the RTOs have, and it's important to look at the model that is currently in place, and that's what the whole legislation is about. Now, if you look at it, this directly targets the practice of onshore transfers driven commission incentives. And that has always been an issue for a number of years now. And the intent is pretty clear, to reduce the churn, stabilize student pathways, and protect sector integrity, because it's important to ensure that the people you're working closely with, that's the agents, the relationship that you have, it's value based and sustainable. Because at the end of the day, if you have two individuals like the agents and the providers have to work together long term, so there has to be some common ground, which is guided by the legislation. It's very important in that respect. So you can still pay the commission. The real question is where our enrollment pipeline actually is coming from, because that's very important to review, to analyze, and in fact to make changes moving forward. So we're talking about this cultural shift. Now we're moving from, if you look at it, we're moving from a value-driven, in fact, a volume-driven system to an outcome-driven system. Previously, the success was measured by how many students you enroll. Uh, that's what has been the focus for many, many years. Now the success will, in fact, increasingly be measured by how many students you retain and support uh, to complete. So that I believe should be a welcoming change for all the providers, and that's the fundamental structural shift. And if you look at it, the reform is primarily based on strong evidence and concern from multiple areas, uh, which we'll look at the coming slides, which is basically, you know, uh, as you can see, there's a shift from the previous model to the emerging model. Uh, Earlier, it was all about more students, faster recruitment, strong agent networks. Now the growth is primarily being driven by measurable factors like completion, visa outcomes, student retention, agent performance, and hence you can see that there's a change in the system from enrollment volume to completion outcomes. It's not just about the volume or the number of students that you have, but of course, uh, it's focused now on how many students are completing their qualification. It's moving from flexibility to stability. Uh, it's not focused on transfers anymore. Completion stability is a priority now. Uh, Again, from relationships to data, that's the critical bit, because it brings with it a lot of transparency. From growth to sustainability, as I said, it's important to have a value-based and sustainable interaction with the stakeholders to ensure quality outcomes. So it's not that the growth is being stopped or it's halted. It's just that it's going to be more disciplined, and that's what is the foundation of the legislation change that is coming in. Institutions that understand this, of course, this shift will have a better operational control, I would say, moving forward.
So Sam, before
Yeah,
you go to the next section, how about I give you a quick break and we run a poll. How
sure,
about
go
that?
for it.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, so I'm launching it for everybody. You should be able to see it on your screen. And this is about how often your RTO formally reviews education and agent performance. So please take a moment to share your responses. So we'll give everyone some time to respond and participate in the poll. Take your time, but we would love to see your participation in the poll.
Yep, that's. I think that's a very important poll to have, because that might change moving forward.
Yeah.
You might want to review your
Yes.
agent agreements earlier.
That is correct, because I think as part of these reforms, monitoring the agents and having a proper system to review the performance for the agents. And the way the performance is reviewed is going to be a very critical indicator of how you manage the reforms and how you address the outcomes coming out of those reviews. So
Correct.
I see majority of the participants, they're leaning towards the annual review of the agent's performance. We're going to address this in the upcoming sections when we talk about the PRISMS data and the PRISMS management for the agent data. But then it might have to shift from annually to a quarterly review, and we'll talk about that in more detail when we reach that section. But thank you so much, everyone, for participating in the poll.
Thanks a lot, everyone. And we'll have some more polls coming in. Ramneet, is that correct?
Yes, yes,
Yeah,
you're
so
right.
Ramneet will bring that forward as and when required. Okay, we'll move forward. Look at the revenue exposure. Now, historically, revenue was driven by student movement between the providers. We've seen that for many, many years. Agent could earn, in fact, multiple commissions from the same student by moving them from one provider to the other, and providers benefited from incoming transfers. Now, this model is now being dismantled. Now, going forward, revenue will probably, as I said, it'll come from completion and not just from the churn. Now, the safest enrollment will be the ones that are completed. So it's important to make sure that every student that is, that is enrolled is completing their studies and is not just transferring from one provider to the other. Now let's look at the financial impact of the change. Now, you can see there are four diagnostic questions on the screen, which is basically a test for your current systems. And if uh, we put forward these four questions to the team that you have, the leadership team, uh, you will have a better understanding of where your organization is headed. Now, questions worth asking internally are, what percentage of your enrollments involve prior Australian study? So it's important to see where your students are coming from. Are they onshore students or are they from overseas? How much revenue is tied to the agent recruitment? That'll give you an understanding of, the chunk of the revenue where it lies, whether you have budgeted out or you want to, redirect your revenue for quality outcomes or compliance or whatever is a priority. How concentrated is our revenue across small number of agencies? Again, that'll give you a complete picture of where uh, where your revenue is going to and what is the size or the quality of the agencies that you are focused upon, and what proportion of students transfers out within short time frames. So these four critical questions will definitely help initiate a very important analysis at your end, which will eventually help you in strategizing moving forward. Very strong, robust strategy to manage your agents. Now, if a significant portion of your revenue has historically been supported by movement, then of course this reform, it'll require you to recalibrate, in fact, your current strategies. But of course, remember, there's nothing to panic. Recalibration, in fact, is highly recommended at all times, and most of the cases, it helps in improving the quality of services that you offer. Uh, so in fact, talking about the stress testing questions, again, there are some indicators that we'll look at because uh, we will have to make sure that your approach is proactive and not just reactive at the end of the day. Because um, if your team is capable of identifying the indicators that may lead to issues around both your systems and your operations, it's important to act proactively and make the changes. So as you can see, there are five very strong indicators, fragility indicators as we call them, that'll help you identify uh, which direction your organization is headed towards. Now, if there's a heavy dependence on one or two agents, of course, that can be a problem. High visa refusal rates associated with certain channels, that can be a problem as well. Short average enrollment duration. As I said, it's important for you to make sure that students complete the qualification. So you got to make sure that students complete their qualification and stay in the organization, stay with your RTO for longer duration and complete the course that they're enrolled in. And market concentration risk. So remember, high volume does not automatically equal healthy volumes. So it's important to look at where the students are coming from and sorry, and what strategies you have in place to manage them, not just the students, of course, the agents. And performance quality now matters more than ever. So that's very important. Now, a stable enrollment growth is built on completion. That's for sure. So these are the indicators that you got to carefully look at. You're going to look at the transfer reliance. You got to look at high visa refusal agents, high incompletion. Now, high incompletion is probably the most critical thing that will tell you a lot of a lot about what's happening within the organization at different levels. Right from the quality of training and assessment that you have, not just who is bringing in the students, and will also help you identify strategies that you can implement moving forward to ensure that the students are completing their qualifications. Okay, we'll move on. Sorry. I'll probably stop here and I'll ask Khushbu to take over from here. Kush?
Sure, Sam. Thank you
And
so much for that.
and while we are moving to the next section, let me just do a quick poll. So I'm launching it now, and this is about prisms. Does your RTO actively review Prism's agent performance report? So you should be able to see the poll on your screen soon. And I would, encourage everyone to please participate in the poll, because the next section is about the Prism. So we would love to see your responses. So we'll give everyone some time to participate.
I strongly encourage everyone to please participate in
Yes,
this poll because that will definitely help me navigate through the next section in a much better manner.
yes.
We do have approximately 50% responses so far. If we can please have some more people to respond on it, that would be great.
Yes, please go ahead and do the polls. Important for us to to guide the presentation in that direction. That'll help you resolve the queries if you have any.
Okay, so
All good. Yeah.
we do see about 12 to 15% of the participants they've responded that they're not aware of the reports on prisms. And then we have about 40% who are regularly monitoring, and then there are 40% responses who are occasionally monitoring the prisms report. And that is very crucial as part of the reforms that we're talking about, because everyone is aware of the commission bands and the changes that are coming across the commission bands. But there is one very important shift that is happening, which is the PRISM's data management and the PRISM's intelligence that is being extended to a level where you have complete transparency on the agents that you're working with. So you get access to the agent data in terms of how many visa refusals are happening for that agent, what are the completion rates for that agent, and what are the turnaround times for that agent. These reports are not automatically populated in your prisons management system. You have to request access to these reports by going to the user module within prisons, and then once you request the access, then you get access to all that data. Moving forward after 1st of April, it's going to be very, very crucial that we're not just talking about monitoring the agent's performance. We actually monitor the data that is coming from prisons because it is now a regulatory requirement and that data is publicly available. So earlier, the agent performance was merely based on the relationships, the experience that the students had with the agents, and the trust that was built between the college and the agents. With the shift in the reforms, we can now clearly see that what are the visa refusal rates, what are the incompletion rates, what are the transfer patterns which are linked to that particular agent. You cannot access the data of the agents who are not listed on your provider portal. But any agent who is an authorized agent for your college, you will get access to the data for that particular agent. This changes the internal dynamics that you build with the agent provider relationship. Agent management can no longer be purely based on the relationships, and it must definitely be based on the data that you see on Prisms and collect from feedback from the students. Compliance and marketing teams moving forward, they cannot be separated, and no marketing decisions can be made in isolation without consulting with the governance and the compliance teams. The boards, the high managerial agents within the college, they will definitely have to have proper dashboards set up, have proper reporting systems set up to have the visibility of the prisons data throughout the year. It's highly recommended that these reports are looked into on a regular basis. If not monthly, they should be looked at on a quarterly basis. As compliance consultants, we do recommend that initially these reports are looked at on a monthly basis just to understand the movement of the students and to understand the quality of the agent mix that is sitting on your system currently. So moving on to what exactly is Prism's going to show you. I've briefly mentioned that you'll get access to the visa refusal rates, which means any agent specific visa refusal data that enables the identification of the agents whose student cohorts are consistently getting visa refusals that will directly show up on the Prism's database. You will also get access to the incompletion and cessation data, which means that you can track the incompletion rates or early course completion that is sitting under that particular agent. This um, matrix is very, very important for you to understand the quality of the agents because any agent who has a very low completion rates or if they're sitting at a very early completion data with high numbers, that reflects the quality of the agent and it is very important for the provider to put that question to the agent on why the data or why that number is going so high. Again, the transfers and reliance of the agents on transferring the students from one provider to another is going to become a very important data index for the provider to monitor on a regular basis.
Just at that, Kush, I just want to add something very important just came to my mind. I
Mhm.
think it'll help if the review of agent reports is listed as on the compliance schedule that most of the RDOs have, and that'll help the compliance team to you can list it as a quarterly review or a biannual review, so that you don't miss out. And as you rightly mentioned, it's critical to have a look at those reports because that'll define the strategies that the RTOs want to put in place, uh, especially around after the 1st of April. So it's good to update your compliance calendars or schedules, whatever you call it, and include this as a part of include the Prism's reporting review as a part of your compliance task. Yeah.
Definitely, Sam. I think that's a very good recommendation, but also it's very highly recommended that we have a system in place and we have a monitoring system in place, because the raw data pulled out from prisms is not going to give you immediate meaningful actions that you can take from that data. So it's very important that we establish the systems and we establish the reporting systems in such a way where you can analyze the data that you get out of prisms, and then you're able to understand and translate that into outcomes so that you can make some decisions. And we'll be talking about the agent risk segmentation in some of our next slides that are coming up. We can give you a little bit of guidance on how that report can be set up. But if you have any further questions, we'll be happy to address them later after the session as well. So, why this visibility of the agent's performance publicly? How is it going to change the internal power? Earlier, up until today, we know that the industry has been marketing led. Agents' decisions are driven by the relationship strength. They are more volume targeted. The agents who have more number of students to feed the pipeline, they're preferred over the agents who have less number of students by default, because there is no visibility of any other data or any other index to measure the agents on. So by default, it is taken as an understanding that if a agent is having more number of students, that is a good quality agent, because the students are going to that agent and that agent has the capability of providing more volumes to the college. Now, when the data driven governance is put into action, the agent oversight will be informed by the performance data that is driven from the prisms system. And out of those volumes, it is very important for the providers to segregate the numbers which are either transfer led, or if it is high transfer agent which is driving the data, or high refusal rates which are bringing those numbers. So it is very important that we do some proportionate matrix before we actually encourage any certain class of agents into the college. And it is also a very critical integration, as you've rightly pointed out, Sam. The compliance and marketing teams, they cannot work in isolation. They have to work together, because all the marketing information, all the marketing insight that is gathered outside in the market, that needs to meet the governance index and the governance analytical data that is being gathered. And then together between the governance and the marketing team, they can then put together reports or insights for the management of the college to take certain decisions. It
Absolutely.
shouldn't be only a marketing meeting moving forward from 1st of April. It has to be a participation from compliance, marketing, and the high management people from the college.
Absolutely. You're right.
So when we talk about the agent risk segmentation, in this whole environment, the segmentation becomes even more essential, because it is not all the agents would carry the same profile. It is not that some agents may be able to produce very high completion rates, but they can have low visa refusal rates. Some should be able to produce very high volumes, but then that can be elevated by very high refusal rates as well. Because sometimes when the agents they pull up a lot of applications, and we have seen this in the TPS risk index also. Because the higher volumes a provider is taking, and if the visa refusals also go high as part of that activity, then automatically the assessment level gets impacted. It's going to be the same thing for the agents also, because if you continue to keep an agent who is a high risk agent, you have to be mindful as a provider that that visibility is out there with the department. and you'll be questioned in your next performance activity on why you're continuing to work with an agent when they have such high visa refusal rates, or if they're having very low completion rates. For that matter, if an agent has a background of doing a lot of transfers onshore, that will also be a red flagged agent. And any provider continuing to work with that agent will be questioned on what are the reasons that no actions are being taken internally in order to address the performance of that agent. So, in order to understand the whole agent risk segmentation, we've also worked on this quadrant, which is a very standard industry based risk model that we work on, which clearly gives you what agents to nurture, which are the agents that you should be looking for your RTOs. So basically, agents who are giving performance of higher completion rates and lowest visa refusal rates are the best agents for the college to work with. On the contrary, if the agents are having a very high visa refusal rate and they have very low completion rates, they are definitely sitting in the red quadrant, and you have to take some immediate actions with those agents. The longer you take to take an action for such agents, more risk it is for the overall compliance of the RTO. And it's definitely being monitored because all the data is visible, everything is known to everyone. The actions delayed can cost a lot to the provider. So it is no longer your personal choice to terminate an agency agreement internally or not, but it needs to be data driven. The more we ignore the data, the more problems it's going to create in any of your performance activities that come up. Before we move on to the contract review, I think we can sum up whatever we have discussed so far, Sam, because otherwise it'll
Sure.
be too much of a rush into the session.
Of course.
Contract, again, is a very lengthy topic, and I think it's a crucial topic for everyone to understand.
Yeah.
So, yes.
No, while you would, just slide back, I was just thinking about as you showed up that quadrant. Uh, I think, I've seen RTOs struggling to clearly define who's going to do what, because at the end of the day, if you don't identify the individuals who will be actually doing the task and who will take the ownership, no matter how good the policies are, the frameworks are, they will never be implemented the way they should be. So I would probably recommend this to all those who are attending this session is to probably go back and clearly identify your team members who you think are capable or who think you think are qualified uh, and have got the interest to monitor agent partnership agreements and to look closely at the reports. In fact, there will be a lot of training that will go into it as well. Talking about the individuals, you'll probably have to have a training program uh, for your team so that they identify, as Khushbu, you mentioned that the data that you extract from Prism may not be in that form and shape that'll make sense to start with. So you're going to have individuals who are capable of analyzing that data, and if they are not, then probably have to train them and identify a team before while you're developing that strategy so that you can effectively implement this. Otherwise, you'll probably attend this webinar, go back, make some notes, and that's about it. And it's not possible for an individual to just do everything at the same time. Of course, the CEOs are responsible for overall compliance, but of course, you need to identify the team members, whether they are marketing officers or RTO managers or training managers who will probably be doing this exercise, will review the Prism reports on a quarterly basis or a biannual basis. So that's, I think, very important. And of course, you also need to develop some guidelines for your agents so that you meet them often and tell them, educate them as well, that there's nothing of concern, but what the intent of this change is. Because when you work together on similar value-based systems, that's when the real change will happen.
Definitely. I couldn't agree more, Sam. I think accountability and responsibility within the RTO, it's always been of prime importance.
Yeah, I think it's very
And with the
important.
outcome standards and with the 2025 standards, I think by now everyone understands the importance as well. And with every reform and every shift, it is a difficult phase, it is a transition phase, but then the sooner we accept the change and we implement the systems and move towards them, it is always better, because the
Correct.
more denial we have towards the change, we delay the whole process, and then it starts creating a backlog of compliance, and that's always a concern within the environment that we're working in, because it's always hard to go back and bring
Correct.
up any changes. So it's very, very important that we have proper accountability and proper responsibility delegated to each and every staff within the RTO, so that everyone is aware who needs to pull out the report from prisms,
Correct.
where does the report need to go, who's going to look into the report, what are the things that need to come out of the report, and what are the final actions that need to be taken once that report is finalized and analyzed. So that's
Correct.
definitely a very important point.
Yep.
So, coming to the next topic, which is again a very important layer of the reforms that are happening, contract review framework for all the agent agreements. The agreements, they must now reflect the performance reality. That is definitely there. It is not just a tweaking of language within the agreement. There is a shift in how the agreements are drafted. So definitely the colleges should be looking at the commission structures. They need to look at the transfer related clauses that are sitting in the agreements. We also need to look at the termination rights and the performance expectations from the agent agreements. Apart from that, there has to be a very black and white clarity on the reporting obligations, the disclaimers that need to go in the agency agreements, because there's a lot of data that colleges owe to the department and regulatory authorities upon request. For example, the commission structures and the commission data that can be requested by the high officials, by regulatory authorities from any provider at any given point. It is not a reporting requirement at this stage. There is no set reporting cycle for the commission structures, but moving forward after 1st of April, each and every dollar paid towards the agent commission becomes accountable, and it can be requested as part of the reporting from the department, just like we have to have the protected fee account reporting and the TPS reporting. So this is one important thing we need to understand here, that this is not about confrontation or having a different communication with an agent or something. It's a shift for the whole industry overall. When we talk about providers, it is a huge shift. And when we look at the agent side, it is a big shift for them also. It's more about how we align the relationships, how do we come up with the contractual requirement, and they must be looked into in line with the reforms that are happening, rather than just on paper tweaking the language, because till the time we see the change in the behavior, till the time we have a shift in the behavior and the practices that are happening between the providers and the agents, this shift is not going to translate into practice. And if this shift is not translated into practice, it's going to become very heavy for the providers to carry on for the next coming months, because it's going to be a difficult period overall if it is not managed properly. So some of the
Absolutely.
immediate contact review areas that we've noted as part of the legislative instruments review that we have completed so far, and these are just recommendations from our side. it is highly recommended that you look at your current agency agreements and you look at all the clauses in line with the legislative requirements, including the recommendations that we are providing here. So the commission clauses definitely need to be looked at very closely because all the commission structures, provisions, offers, they need to comply with the new transfer restrictions that are in place. You need to remove or amend any clauses that permit payment for onshore transfer recruitment. And to clarify this, there are certain payments which are still acceptable for the onshore transfer payments. And for that, you will have to refer to the legislative instrument specifically for the exceptions to point a few items over there. If if a student has completed a principal course and if that student decides to enroll with the RTO as the new provider, in that case, the onshore commission payment is becomes liable to the agent. However, if the principal course is still running for the student, and in the interim period the student decides to transfer, in that case, the onshore transfer commission will not apply. So you have to decide on case to case, and you have to have very transparent clarity between the team and in the contractual paperwork that you sign up with the agents on what is allowed and what is not allowed. So transfer related language, that is the second thing, that audit all the references to student transfers. Contracts should explicitly exclude commission entitlements for transferring the sourced enrollments. So if a student is studying at another provider, any incentive, any sort of encouragement to transfer that student to the RTO is a very big red flag for the RTOs after 1st of April. Termination rights, again, they need to be strengthened within your contractual obligations because the provisions, they need to include performance-based triggers. You need to link your performance reviews to the data that you derive from prisms. That is very, very, very important after 1st of April and with the changes that are coming up. The performance KPIs, you definitely it'll be good for the RTOs to include some measurable key performance indicators into every agreement for the agents with clear consequences for underperformance or for poor performance or any practices that are not permitted under the new reforms. You also need to have compliance obligations noted in the agent agreement, which requires all the agents to comply with all the ESOS Act obligations and the cracker standards with explicit acknowledgement of their responsibilities under the standard 4.4. Reporting requirements again is a very crucial topic because that mandates the regular reporting from agents on the student outcomes, visa results, and any material changes to their operations or ownership. We'll cover the ownership point in the upcoming slides because that again is a very important separate topic of the control and ownership and the fit and proper person requirements within the new reforms. We'll touch base on that in the next slides.
Just at that, Kush, I think this was a very important slide with a very important information on it. Uh, I think, of course, looking at these six areas within the agent contract is going to be very crucial. And not to mention the agent declaration towards the end of the contract that you ask the agents to sign off on. Make sure that you review that as well and include, all these specifics that we've been discussing in this presentation. So, yes, just want to mention
Yeah.
that. All good.
So commission model recalibration, again, the reforms, they demand more than simply removing the non-compliant clauses. They require a fundamental rethinking of how the commission structures and how do you incentivize the agents overall within the provider. So if the commission structures currently are only linked to the volumes. More students, more commission, more bonus. You need to rethink the strategy because it definitely needs to shift from more volumes to more completions so that it is tier based and it is based on the completion rates coming from that agent instead of just the volumes that we derive from the agent. Performance based incentives, you can offer bonus commission tiers for agents who maintain low visa refusal rates, and you can decide some thresholds based on the current dynamics of the agents you have on your prison systems. This is something you'll have to work internally with your team and create some dashboards and benchmarks so that you can measure the agent performance when they're onboarding a new agent, and you can make decisions whether you need that agent actually as part of your pool, or can you avoid signing up with that agent given they're not meeting the benchmarks. Another layer will
Yep.
be that you eliminate the transfer stacking, which means that you'll have to remove all contractual provisions that allow multiple commission events from single students' journey when they arrive in Australia. That is the bottom line of the reforms that are happening. That is the key message that is being sent out. Transferring the onshore students from a course that they applied for which they get the visa, transferring that student to another course is something that is being addressed as part of these reforms. So, if as a provider you are trying to facilitate or trying to work out a strategy to facilitate that process, sooner or later it will create problems for you as a provider. Offshore focused structures, again, this is a huge discussion within the industry. We understand the current dynamics of the industry. We understand currently the wet sector does not have a very bright visa approval rates from offshore, but expectation is that once the onshore market is a bit streamlined and is balanced out, it is expected that the offshore market will start reviving. So it will be in the interest of the providers to shift their cycles to the offshore structures and start prioritizing the agent pipelines that are from offshore so that you get direct student enrollments from overseas. I am
That's
mindful
true.
of the time, but we do have quite a bit to cover right now. However, if any one of you has to leave at 12 o'clock, we'll still share the complete recording with all the attendees, but we'll continue with the session and we'll try to cover up all the slides that we have and all the information that we have to give.
And even if we, like, before we move to this section, I think let's take a moment for our final poll before we wrap up.
Sure.
So I'm launching it now. It should be on everyone's screen shortly. And again, I would request everyone to participate in the poll. So it should be on your screen. And this is about, where you feel your RTO will need to focus the most attention. So please share your responses. And so I will request everyone to participate before we, close the poll so that, we can move ahead with the next section.
I think it would have been best to have all of the above from me for this one because it's very hard for me to pick one out of the three. So,
I was thinking the same exactly. But to tell you the truth, I'm happy that 55% of the participants have mentioned recruitment strategy adjustments
I
because
know.
that'll eventually encompass, everything that we've been talking about.
No, definitely. I think from where I see, it's very hard to choose one. One would balance the business, the other one would balance the compliance.
Yeah.
So, highly recommended. Look at all three areas. They're very, very, very important as part of the reforms. So there's no one priority area. Everything needs to go hand in hand. Definitely, you have to look at the recruitment strategy because that is what is going to build the pipeline for future for the provider. Then
True.
monitoring the agent performance, you need to set up the system. Starting 1st April, you don't have to start monitoring the agent performance, but if you clean up the current pool of your agents and if you determine where they are sitting based on the data that is available right now, that will at least give you a fresh start to see which agents to keep after 1st of April. And it's a very good opportunity for the providers to do a clean start and do a complete refresh. And agent agreements and agent commissions, I think that is a no bargain over there, no negotiation over there. That is something that needs to be looked at for sure. So definitely, and I'm happy to see we've got like equal percentage everywhere. So that's very encouraging. Okay,
Absolutely.
so moving on to the governance and ownership side of things, it's been a discussion lately, and we've seen a lot of changes linked to the governance and ownership when we talk about the fit and proper person requirements. We've already seen additional sections added to the fit and proper person requirement forms, but it doesn't stop there. We have to, as RTOs, we need to have systems in place. If you onboard an agent, at the time when you're onboarding an agent, you need to have mechanisms in place where you can pick up any conflict of interest, any involvement of that agent with any other ownership structure with any other provider. It is very important for you to know if an agent has a stake in another college. Because that becomes a conflict of interest. And if it is not noted at the time of onboarding an agent, it can become a problem towards the governance and ownership structures later down the line. These obligations, they actually introduce completely a fresh layer of disclosures. The requirements, they're basically to ensure the transparency where the relationships of the agents with the providers can create some perceived conflicts. So the perception, it matters a lot in the regulatory settings. Agent management, it is no longer a marketing function. We have talked about that, but it definitely sits very highly up in the governance oversight. And we have felt that heat in the recent performance activities with the focus shifting on getting declarations and having very robust fit and proper person requirements and having proper disclosures of any conflict of interest that are perceived coming from any third parties or any other agents. The
Correct.
key stakeholders within the RTOs, the boards, if we have the governing boards, it is very important for them to understand the agent concentration that is sitting in the RTO, the refusal exposure that is happening through those agents, the transfer patterns that are occurring with the agent mix that you have on the provider, and the ownership relationships. These are the key things that you have to be across at any given time within the RTO operations. So if we move on to the governance and ownership control obligations, um, there are different timelines when the agents can gain ownership into other RTOs. First step will be when you're onboarding the agent, you have to have proper checks to identify any perceived conflict of interest. You need to have that included in your agent application form. You need to have declarations at the time of onboarding the agent. If the agents gain control of provider once they are signed up with the college, there has to be a clause in the agent agreement to address the same, to make it a responsibility of the agent to inform the college as soon as they gain ownership in any other provider. if there is any ownership structural change, any material change of your institute, or if the agent has gained a certain percentage of shares in another college, it is again the responsibility of the agent to provide that information to the RTO. So this the whole chain, and if the agent actually has ownership in your college, it again becomes your responsibility to notify that to ASPER within 10 days of that change occurring.
That's great.
So fit and proper exposure again, it talks about the undisclosed related party arrangements. It talks about the agent influence over management or the conflicted commission structures. To break that down a little bit, where the financial or the governance relationships between the providers and agents have not been formally declared to the regulator, this will create hidden conflicts of interest. And the information, if it becomes available to the provider, it is a direct, um, how do I say, it's a direct implication of the intent of the provider to hide that relationship, and that becomes a serious breach of governance and self assurance within the RTO. Again, the agent influence over the management. If the agent has an influence over the decision making of the management of the college, then that also needs to be reported and noted within the conflict of interest strategy of the college. Any conflicted commission structures, which means that any direct commission structures or indirect commission structures, they have to be noted, and any commission provided to the agent in any form or kind becomes accountable to be reported to the regulator when requested to do so. So any sort of marketing budgets, any gift vouchers, any outside the box arrangements with the agents, they all fall under the regulatory framework. And when the commission structures and commission disclosures are requested by the regulator, this will fall in the definition of commission, because commission definition is not restricted to only cash payment of the commissions anymore. So the strategic rebuild, where does the growth come from now? It comes from capability, it comes from the quality agents, it will come from the agents who are giving you students who are completing the qualifications, who are giving you 100% completion rates. It comes from the offshore diversification of your pipelines. It comes also from the brand positioning that you have for your college. And it will also come from the quality of education that you're providing to the student, because at the end of the day, word of mouth will travel faster than any recruitment practices you put in place. Completion is going to be your revenue protection, because the more students you have completed on the system, higher is going to be the rating for the provider. Any low completion rates will get picked up by the regulator very quick, because all that information is clearly visible, publicly available, and we've all seen how closely the prism's data is being monitored and is being picked up for any breaches, any gaps that are noted by the regulator.
Absolutely, Kush. I just want to add a few bits there. I would
Yes,
probably,
sir.
how I see it is a time for a competitive advantage. This is, uh, this should be clearly discussed with the higher management within the organizations, the academic governance board, because if you take advantage of what's coming and rejig your current strategies, this is the time for growth, the real growth, that we've been waiting for, which is capability led, as you rightly mentioned. And again, it won't harm to go back to the whiteboard and start discussing, do some mind mapping on what is going to work for in your organizational context, in the context of what you have in the scope, the capability of individuals that you have, and come up with a strategy that is focused on completions and not just about transfers. So you can still have a lot of students moving forward, but only when you have the right strategy in place. So
Definitely, Sam. Definitely. I completely agree, but I think it's just that it is a very huge shift for the whole sector. It takes time to, whenever there's a change, it is very difficult to adjust to that change because for
of
years
course,
and years, from the time I've started in this industry, I've seen the recruitment being, led by the agents, and it's very hard to think anything outside that box. So it's definitely a very big shift within the industry. But the sooner we accept the change and we readjust our strategies, as you've rightly said, better it's going to be for the provider because the legislative instrument is already out. It's already been implemented. We already have that. No matter how much we discuss, how much we talk about it, there is no going back from here. So we
correct,
have to keep
absolutely.
moving forward. So whatever decisions are made, whatever strategies are made, they have to be done in line with what is already being implemented. It cannot be against that because that's just going to create more confusion and more non-compliance, given the transparency that's been created around these reforms. It is just next to impossible to sort of stick to a relationship if it is not a quality agent, because that's going to reflect on the books and records sooner or later. So it is very,
Absolutely.
very important to consider this very serious and very, black and white and move forward and plan the strategy accordingly.
Absolutely, I can't agree more. Kush, there's one more thing that comes to my mind when you're talking about strategic rebuild. I think communication will play a significant role here. You know, how effectively you communicate both with your internal stakeholders and your external stakeholders. In fact, what I mean is your team within your RTU and the agents and the external parties that you deal with. Because if you communicate the right thing right from day one, that's the message that you're sending across, both to your staff members and to the agents. And that communication should be in line with what we're talking about. And when the communication is right, you set a standard. People start understanding what you're all about. There's a loud and clear message that yes, this is what you want to stick with, and that'll probably be. I see that as a good beginning where you can actually engage like-minded individuals who will come forward looking at your communication, and then you can build a strategy around it.
Definitely, definitely, Sam. And I think if all providers are sending out the same message and sticking to the same measuring line, it becomes easier as opposed
Absolutely.
to if everyone's talking a different language and trying to have different strategies, then it becomes difficult to sort of operate in that environment. But that is yet to happen. So we can just hope for the best and look at it from
Yeah.
the legislative lens. So with the implementation roadmap, we have pretty much covered what are the things that we need to be looking at, but this is just a short checklist for all of you to look at. What are the things that you should be doing prior to 1st of April? Definitely have a look at the contract reviews, whatever agents. First step I would say is just make sure you've got access to the Prism's reports and you pull out the Prism's data for your current mix of the agents. You analyze that data, you make a decision what are the agents that you want to keep. Then go back to the contract reviews and renew the contracts for the agents that you intend to keep within the RTO. Have your contracts updated in line with the regulatory reforms, and then have the commission clauses updated, identify the high risk agents, make sure you've got the ownership disclosures done as part of the renewal process that you're doing as of 1st of April, and then have your key high managerial people informed within the RTO of whatever's happening at the marketing level and at the compliance level. And from the marketing side, from the strategy rebuild side, you definitely have to have the alternative channels activated for your recruitment strategies. That sort of brings us to the close of the session. And we do feel the pain of the industry. We do feel the confusion that we see in the industry. But being a part of this industry for such a long time, we can tell you that it's not a contraction. It's not. It's just a correction to a system that has come to a level where it was going completely out of control for the regulators. Sectors, they mature when the incentives align with sustainability. If you have students who come to you and complete the course 100% with you, you as a provider can imagine how much work is sorted out in terms of managing their post progress, managing their attendance. Because if you have dedicated students who are not switching from one course to another, it automatically resolves a lot of issues within the provider, and it starts looking much better and much brighter for the industry overall. The colleges that view this reform strategically rather than defensively will definitely emerge stronger. That is our belief. And the commission led expansion will narrow down. We have seen how the commission models have been putting a lot of pressure on the financial side to the providers. So it is probably in the best interest of all stakeholders of the industry to see this as a correction and just start afresh from here with a fresh strategy, with a fresh system for a better future. Sam, do you want to add something to it?
No, absolutely. I completely agree with what you've said, Kush. This is a correction, an opportunity to to rebuild a stronger and a much robust recruitment strategy that you have. And of course, it focuses on resilience and long-term sustainability. So I think with that, we come to an end of this presentation. Um, Thank you all for sparing time to attend this webinar in the middle of the day, Thursday, and we can probably take some questions if Ravneet is ready. If you can read out some questions that we have.
Yes, we have one question from Ben from Alliance College. It says principal course. What if student is in a packaged course and wants to transfer prior to principal course commencing?
Kush, would you
So
like to take that?
if the student has a visa based on the principal course COE that has already been issued to the student is already locked into that principal course, and the student cannot transfer that course prior to finishing the principal course. They can transfer voluntarily, like they can directly transfer after they complete 6 months in the principal course directly from their principal course provider to another provider, but
Right.
it cannot be incentivized or it cannot be supported by an agent commission or an agent transfer. If so, we need to understand the difference between the whole reform is not to stop the legitimate transfers. It is just a pause and just a stop on encouraging students to transfer while they are enrolled into their principal courses. Current practice of the industry has led to encouraging students to transfer as soon as they arrive on shore in their principal courses, and that has been heavily driven by the agents, unfortunately. And that is the reason why these reforms, they do not ban the transfer of the course if the student voluntarily wants to do it after completing 6 months into the principal course. Hope that answers the question. But if you have any further clarification needed, we'll be more than happy to talk to you. And for the rest of the questions, I think we've already gone over time. So we'll probably take some time over the emails and come back to you for the other questions we may have after we're done with the session.
Yes, and that brings us to the end of today's session. So, on behalf of Khush, Sam, and the teams of SKG Consulting Services and Careers in Care Group, thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. We hope that you're leaving with a clear picture of what needs to happen at your RTO before 1st April. But before we wrap up, I would like to mention that we have curated the Agent Management Pack, a practical resource to help providers work through agent management and transparency obligations in a structured way. As a thank you for attending today, all the attendees will receive a 20% off the pack. So you will hear from us shortly with the details. And if you have more questions following today's session, please feel free to reach out to us at info@skgconsulting.com.au or info@careersincare.com.au. We are more than happy to help you. And